I realized the gravity of the situation, you know, like I'm gonna die. And what's amazing is the first thing I thought about when I first realized that is I was just really grateful. You know, I was just like, I had a really good life and I had really good family and I had really good friends and I was really lucky.
How did you get yourself in a situation where you were lost at sea so far from home?
Well, you know, I was working in politics for a long time, and one day I went to an event with a bunch of Trump supporters, and they choked me around the neck in a military-style chokehold, and then threw me down a stairwell, and that gave me PTSD and depression, and I got evaluated for it, and that was the diagnosis. And you know, after that it took some time, but I realized I really needed to take a step back and kind of clear my head and reorient myself for moving forward. And so a friend of mine called up, who is a really close friend of mine, and she said, hey, I got 2 tickets to Asia round trip, you want to go? And I was like, yeah, how long is it? And she said 2 weeks. And I was like, okay. So I went on that trip, but when I was there I just decided I'm just going to stay here and keep traveling, you know, because this is really helping. And so then I was traveling all throughout Asia. I went to, you know, Vietnam, China, Cambodia, Myanmar, Nepal, Japan, South Korea, Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia, which was such a beautiful place. It's like heaven on earth. It's really like one of the most beautiful places I've ever been in the world. I've traveled a lot around the world, and it's like the sunsets on this island I was on are like in my top 10 list of sunsets from my life. Like this place has like a few, you know what I mean? Every night I stayed there is like on my list of top sunsets I've ever seen in my life. So it's a very beautiful place. And I was swimming one night at sunset, and it's a long story, but the short version is a riptide comes in and pulls me out into the sea, into the middle of the ocean. And then I'm just like, very shortly after that, I'm like I realized the gravity of the situation, you know, like I'm gonna die. And what's amazing is the first thing I thought about when I first realized that is I was just really grateful. You know, I was just like, I had a really good life and I had really good family and I had really good friends and I was really lucky. And I knew that that was kind of an interesting way to feel in that moment. I was like, oh, this is unique. You know, I didn't know if maybe that's how everybody feels, I don't know. But yeah, so I started swimming and I was pretty sure I was gonna drown. I found out later you can really only drown if you panic and hyperventilate, and I like meditate every day, most days. And so I didn't panic. So like you can't really drown. You can die of like hypothermia, you can die of dehydration, but if you don't panic and you keep swimming, then apparently you can swim for up to 12 hours. You know, if you'd asked me if I thought I could swim for 12 hours before this, I'd tell you no. But I went into the water at sunset and I came out of the water at sunrise. So that's how long I was in the water, you know. I saw the moon up in the middle of the sky. I saw it set all the way down to the horizon. You know, I saw the stars were very bright above me. It was extremely cold in the water, even though it's pretty tropical. Thankfully the water's pretty salty, so it actually makes you more buoyant. So that was, I think, one thing that helped me swim for so long. But a really cool thing happened. There's like bioluminescent phytoplankton in the water, right, which are like these glowing fish. So as you move through the water, it like lights up and glows. And I was like, I'd always wanted to see this, right? I've literally gone to places in my life to see this and never seen it. And I was like, this is one of the things on my bucket list. And I'm like, sweet, I'm gonna knock it off the bucket list right before I kick the bucket, you know? It was like stars below and stars above, you know? And so there were some moments where I was like in the water and just laughing, you know, like thinking about great times I've had in my life and just like really funny experiences. And it's not like your life flashes before your eyes in a movie. It's more like you just kind of, you think about the things that are most important to you know, like you only have a few hours left to live, if that, or maybe a few minutes. Like it really comes down to like, this is crunch time. Like, who do you care about most? What do you care about most? And I just didn't think about politics really at all. You know, I thought about my family and I thought about my friends and I thought about how grateful I am for the life that I've lived.
Did you try to swim back toward shore?
Definitely. Like, so what I know from being a lifeguard and doing scuba and stuff like that before is you can't swim against the tide, especially the tide that rolled in was the largest waves they've seen in 20 years. So it just kind of came in out of nowhere. Everybody knew the waves were big. Nobody knew it was going to be that big. And then, so they're like 3 meters tall, which is about 9 or 10 feet tall waves. And you're not gonna, you can't battle the ocean. You know, you can try and fight the tide, but you're just gonna die swimming. So, the government, you know, the waves are so big, the government had even shut the ports down, right? I mean, it was a really big swell that hit the ocean that day, and it just ripped me out in the middle of the ocean. And you know, that's why I ended up swimming for 12 hours. But I knew I couldn't swim against that tide and try and swim back to where I came from. So I could see a shoreline over here where I was like, you know, I could see, like, I got close enough to see brake lights on the beach, on a road. I got close enough to hear waves crashing and see like a bird flying over my head. So I was like, you know, I must be close, right? But every time I'd swim in to get closer to the shore, I'd look up and I'd feel like I'm further away. So I started counting time in my head, and I counted up to like 45 minutes one time. And, you know, I like looked up and was checking to see if I'm getting any closer, and it was like a joke. I was like further away. So I think what was happening is I was like swimming into this swell, you know, going by this island, and then it was just like sweeping me back into the ocean. You know what I mean? So I tried that for maybe like 4 or 5 hours, that one coast, and I just came to the conclusion. I was like I can keep doing this, but I'm gonna die like out here because I'm obviously not getting anywhere closer to that shore, you know? So then I tried to swim back with the waves, which if I caught the waves, if I swam as hard as I possibly could, I could remain on top of a wave, which I'm sure was carrying me a little ways back. But then it was like exhausting, and I was like, okay, if I do, and then I'd stop swimming and I'd kind of fall back the backside of the wave, and it'd sweep me back out further. I saw something else I thought was a ferry or like a docked ship. The next morning I realized it was like another island. It was a hotel that's right on the face of the island, so like just had a bunch of lights that looked like another ship. Tried to swim towards that for a while. One boat came by in the night, you know, like, and I tried to swim towards that. Like, then there was a boat in the morning, and I tried to swim towards it, but they had a motor down, and like, I was like, they're not gonna hear me, you know, they're going way too fast. I'm like a tadpole trying to catch up to a whale, you know what I mean? Like, that's what it's trying to catch a boat. And I was just like, this is hopeless, you know? And so I was like, I don't want to die in fear, you know? I don't want to die scared, because I am so grateful, you know, for life. And so I was just like, this is the point. I just need to surrender. I just need to let it go. You know, I just need to let go. That's the point of this, right? I'm already dead, you know? Like, I just need to let go. And then I saw out of the corner of my eye a boat with a sail out, and I was like, no, fuck it, I want to live. I have unfinished business, you know? Like, I don't want to die tonight. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to catch that boat, but I'm going to swim anyways. You know, I'm just going to keep swimming, and I'm just swimming, and I'm thinking, there is no way I'm going to catch this boat. But I'm yelling, help, 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 SOS, SOS, help, 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 you know? And I keep swimming, and I keep swimming, and I'm just like thinking in my mind, I'm just like, there's no way this is going to happen. The waves keep coming up in between us, so I'm only seeing the boat every 5th second. So I'm like counting like 1, 2, 3, 4, help, 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 SOS, and then swimming as hard as I can for 4 seconds, and then help, 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 SOS. And eventually I get kind of like, I'm not swimming towards the boat, I'm trying to swim to like intersect the boat, right? So I'm like, the boat's going that way, so I'm like, instead of swimming at the boat, I'm going to swim to get in front of it. And at some point I look over and I'm like, I think I'm in front of this boat. Like, I'm kind of in their line, you know? But I'm like, I'm not going to stop screaming now, because that would be the ultimate tragedy, right? You get really close and then they don't hear me and like just run away, and I'd be like, okay, I get it. I get the point, like surrender, let go, you know? And so then they're getting a little bit closer, and I'm like, help, help, I'm screaming till I'm hoarse. You know, my mouth is so like dry and dehydrated. I've swallowed so much salt water on accident. Like, you know how your hands get when they're like wet? Like, my tongue was like that, right? And, but I'm just yelling until I'm hoarse. And eventually I can see the person on the boat. And I'm like, if I could see them, I'm pretty sure they can hear me. You know what I mean? And so I keep screaming, I keep swimming, and eventually the boat comes up. It's like a glorified canoe, like an oversized canoe with like 2 kind of telephone poles on each side to stabilize it, okay?
Outriggers.
Yeah. And I swim up to the boat, and I grab onto one of the stabilizers, and I'm just like, oh my God, like, I'm not gonna die tonight. Like, I'm not gonna die, you know? I was like in complete shock because I'd already accepted death, because I thought there's no one on the water. You know, there's no boats on the water right now. The government shut down the ports, the waves are too big. I've seen one boat in the middle of the night, and I saw two boats in the morning. You know, like the possibility of me being found in the middle of the ocean with 3 boats on the water, like, have to be over 1 billion to 1 or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, it's just impossible. And, you know, I thought, like, I could sense this like little bit of fear in me. I was like, why am I afraid? Why am I scared? There's a little bit left remaining, right? I didn't get rid of all of it. And then I was like, why is that? And I thought, it must be because there's something in my life that I needed to do or I wanted to do that I didn't get done. And the thing that came to my mind was I always wanted to have kids. I always wanted to be a father. And so that's why I started swimming towards that one shore, like my life depended on it, because my life depended on it, you know? Like, I was like, and I just thought, you know, I have unfinished business, so I don't want to die tonight. But I did at multiple points come back to the thought, I just need to surrender, I just need to let go. That's the point of this exercise. That's why I'm out in the middle of the ocean. There's obviously no one here to save me, so it's time to go. And I just wanted to greet death in the best way possible, you know, like they say, as an old friend, rather than, you know, dehydrated and sunburnt and freaking out and screaming, you know. Although I did have some screaming with, like, help, yelling at the shore and stuff, you know.
Tell us about the man who saved you and how he came to be there.
Poor's the guy in the name of the guy who saved me. He pulled me out of the water after I grabbed onto his boat and gave me his shirt and gave me his, like, the pants off of him, you know what I mean? And, like, I was like hypothermic and in shock. Gave me water, gave me like these little chocolate wafers, you know, and just kind of like brought me back to life. He was like the welcoming committee for, you know, coming back to life, and or the gatekeeper of coming back to life. And he doesn't speak any English. So me and Poor haven't had a lot of direct conversations, though we have had some with, like, you know, his family members and friends who can translate. But when he pulled me up in the boat, I was just crying and saying thank you and, like, hugging him and holding his hand. And I just looked at him and I was like, you know, you know, are you Buddhist or are you Muslim? Are you Christian? Buddhist, Muslim, Christian, you know, Buddha, Islam, Christianity. And he was like, yeah, Muslim. And I was like, I just pointed at him and I said, or I pointed to the sky and said, Allah sent you to me. And he went, yeah. And so we go in, and it takes about an hour and a half. He puts the motor down. He had a sail up, which I think is why I could catch him. He puts the motor down. It takes us about an hour and a half with a motor to get into the shore of his island, which is, the island I started on was twice as far than it was getting to his island. So I was about 5 kilometers from Nipah in the water. I was 10 kilometers from the island I started on, which is about something like 6 or 7 miles off the island I started on. It was 6 or 7 miles into the ocean. In, you know, 12 hours. But I was, like, kind of worried still, even though I was on a boat, because, like, these waves were huge, you know, like, there's, like, rocks, you know, like, as tall as trees, and the waves are crashing on them and smashing, like, double the distance of the height of the rocks. You know, it was just, like, massive waves hitting these massive rocks, and I was thinking, man, even if I swam into shore, I might not have made it, because if I hit that point, it could just smash me into the rocks, you know. So there's so many ways to die in the ocean, apparently. It's a powerful force, you know. He pulls me out of the ocean, he gives me water and gives me clothes and a little bit of food and takes me in. It takes us an hour and a half. And he calls ahead to his family and tells them what happened. And by the time we get to shore, the whole village is there. There's like, you know, 100, 200 people, like, lined up on the shore. Like, that was the welcoming committee for coming back to life, you know. And I get out of the boat, and I, like, sink my feet into the water, and I walk up to the sand on the shore, and I just knelt down on the ground and just grabbed the sand in my hands and just, like, pressed it to my head. And this little old woman, like, came up to me. She was the first person to, like, come up to me. She was, like, had to be like 80 years old, and she just picks me up and grabs my hands, and she just, like, opens them up and just starts, like, brushing the sand off my hands, and then she just kind of, like, clasps them together in prayer, you know, is what it felt like, you know. And she said something about God, which, like, I can't remember. I was in a pretty shocked state. And she said something about Poor and family, and, like, he's your brother now, you know. And I was like, yeah, definitely, you know. And, like, all these people, like, welcome me back in. They take me back to their home. They gave me food and water, like some amazing fish and just, like, rice and, you know, and just, like, kind of bring me back to life, you know, let me sleep for a few hours, you know. I wake up and I realize, like, you know, I have to get back to my friends who are on the island to tell them I'm okay, because they just saw me, like, you know, oh, Ryan said he was going swimming and now he disappeared. So They took me back to the island, and they asked me to come to their village afterwards. So I stayed back where I was from for about a day until my friends left, and then I went back to Nipah and spent about 3 or 4 days there, just getting to know their families, and some of them speak English, and just hanging out with people and like eating fish and plastering a wall and like, you know, hanging out with their family. I mean, that's pretty much what they do in Nipah, is they just like hang out with their family all the time. You know, like some people go to work, some people go fishing, some people are building homes, but most everybody's just kind of like hanging out with their family and spending time with them. It's like a family reunion every night, you know, in Nipah. You have like the grandfather and the grandmother, all their children, and then all the children of them. So you have like 60 people like living in about like, you know, the size of this park, right? And then the whole village of Nipah is composed of like 5 families like that, right? So there's about somewhere between 200 or 300 people in the entire village. And yeah, so I stayed there with them, and you know, woke up every day for the sunrise and went every night to the beach for the sunset, just loving life again, you know. And Poor went with me one night to go fix his boat on the beach, and his cousin Ramdan came with me. And Ramdan can speak a little English because he works in the tourism industry. So I asked him, I was like, hey, can you ask Poor a question for me, you know? And he's like, sure. And I was like, you know, can you ask him why he was in the water that day? Like, because I'm thinking, like, if you're in those waves and that water fishing, like, you must really need the money. You know, that was what I kind of thought. So he asked Poor, and Poor responds in Bahasa, and then Ramdan looks at me and he goes, so Poor had a dream that he woke up from, that there was something special in a specific spot in the ocean. Like, not just anywhere in the ocean, but like in this specific spot in the ocean. And so Poor woke up and he went out to the beach, and one of his friends was there, who's a fellow fisherman. And he's like, yeah, I got to go out. I had this dream. I'm going to find something special in the water. And the friend's like, what? You're going out in that? You know, and these boats are like glorified canoes, you know. And so he goes out in the water, and he goes to that spot, and he goes back and forth and back and forth, back and forth. Doesn't have fishing nets out. He's just looking for something special. And he decides, well, it's time to go home. And that's when he finds me. And pulls me out of the water and saves my life.
Pas no aku mimpi, memang jelon no umbak blay umbak. Lagu dek peduli sih, saya nggak si Iping kene marak. Aku mengipi mau ngembu sesuatu. Lampak ulak nih mak ule. Ku dengar suara dengar, tolong menu. Langsung samperin. Tahu ke dengar. Langsung keangkat. Dengar atas langsung kaul menu. Nangis pokok nangis.
Like, I literally would not exist today. I wouldn't be here on this earth if Poor hadn't trusted in the power of his dreams, you know, and just had faith, I guess, that there was something important being communicated to him, however it was coming to him, you know. It's literally like Poor's faith and his bravery are why I'm here today.
Did you think about staying there and not coming back?
Did I think about staying in the water?
No, in the village.
Oh, yeah, I definitely didn't think about staying in the water. I did go back in the water though, because I don't want to be afraid. You know, I don't want to live in fear and think, well, maybe I can't go back, you know, so. But I have been back in the waves, and that was a little shocking, but it's still good, you know. I've got a new relationship with the ocean. She's a powerful woman. The first reason I left is because, like, I was like, every day I'd ask them, I'd like, do you want me to stay another day or do you want me to go? And they'd be like, we want you to stay. So I was only planning on going to their village for one day, but then they'd be like, we want you to stay. And so I stayed for another 3 days. And then I was like, okay, you know, that's kind of like the rule. It's like guests and fish, you know, like 3 days is a good amount, and then they gotta get going, you know, you gotta get tossed out. So I didn't want to overstay my welcome, you know. These people have already saved my life and literally fed me and clothed me and given me a place to stay and shelter after this like harrowing experience. In no way, shape, or form do I want to like be imposing on them, you know what I mean? But they invited me to come back. They really feel like family now, you know, like I feel like I have a home in Indonesia. My other home is in Indonesia, you know, on an island called Lombok. It's a beautiful place. It's really one of the most beautiful places I've ever been in the world. And yeah, so I mean, I guess that's the reason I left. Like, Would I stay there? Will I go back? Yes, absolutely. I would love my family to go there. I would love my children to go there someday when I have some, to meet the man who saved my life and meet his family and his kids. But I definitely feel a very strong bond to them, and I'm going to go back to help build homes at some point, is what I really want to do, if we can do that, you know, if I can do that. I really want to do that.
Were you concerned and then you learned, or was it just a huge shock about the fate of that village?
Yeah, so what happened is I was going to leave and go home. I just wanted to see my brother and my mom. I just wanted to hang out with my family. But the tickets were like really expensive, you know? And so it was like more money than I could afford to get back home at that point. It was kind of like high travel season. And my original plan was to go up to Nepal, which is pretty cheap, and do this hiking trip where, you know, I would be spending very little money every day, you know? So I was like, okay, all things being equal, if I buy a later ticket, then I'll just go to Nepal, I'll not freak out and go home, you know what I mean? And just kind of like, I'll be home soon enough. I'm gonna kind of take the last part of this trip and then go home like I was planning on. So I get on a ferry and I go back to Bali, which is the island I flew out of. And I'm in a place called Padangbai, and I'm on top of this building meditating in the morning. And I open my eyes after meditating, and I'm just like sitting there looking kind of out at the beach and the coastline. And all of a sudden, like the buildings start kind of shaking like this, right? And I've been in an earthquake before, not like a bad one. I've just felt buildings shake. So I knew what it was, but I was also like, this isn't really that bad. This is just a little earthquake, you know? And so I just pack up, go to the airport, fly out to Nepal, and hit the airport, and people are asking me, I'm just starting up conversations with random like travel buddies, you know. They're like, oh, where are you coming from? And I was like, yeah, I was just in Lombok, you know. And they're like, oh yeah, they had a really bad earthquake there. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I was there for the earthquake. Like, it wasn't really that bad, at least where I was. Like, no buildings fell down or anything. They're like, when was that? And I was like, yeah, you know, like 3-4 days ago. They're like, no, like yesterday there was like a really bad earthquake in Lombok, and like it like destroyed like a ton of the island. And I was like, oh. And so then I got on like Facebook and, you know, WhatsApp, and started like messaging the people from Nipah to be like, hey, are you okay? And I didn't hear anything. And even Ramdan, who like when the first earthquake happened that I was there for, he like checked in on Facebook and said like, hey everybody, I'm safe, and like posted that he was safe, just like I did after the earthquake, right? But then I went and looked like for the day of the next earthquake, which is like actually a magnitude like 7 or 8 earthquake, the really big one. And he hadn't posted anything like that. And so I'm sitting there on this like bus in Nepal thinking like, oh my God, like I just left this place in Indonesia where these people saved my life, and like they could all literally be dead sitting under the rubble of these buildings. And I'm like on a 7-hour bus trip, and I'm thinking like, okay, so if I get to the end of the 7-hour bus trip and I get off that bus and I get on the bus coming back immediately, that's 7 hours, then I go back to the airport and fly out, I could be there in like 3 days since the earthquake, which is like how long you can go without water, right? And I was like, okay, so if I get to the end of this bus ride and I like haven't heard anything, then like I'm just gonna turn around and go back. Which seems crazy, but like literally like this guy saved my life. So like if I'm the person that shows up to this village where no one's at, and I'm like picking up a rock and being like, here's water, like it would be like, well, I didn't realize I was gonna repay that favor so soon, buddy, you know, like, but that's kind of what's going on in my mind, you know, that's what I was gonna do. But by the time I got to the end of that bus ride, Ramdan had gotten back to me and been like, hey, everybody's safe, nobody died. Later somebody did die, one of the elderly women, from kind of like stuff that happened, but it wasn't like a mass casualty situation, right? Like it was like every home was destroyed though, like every home. And I was kind of like, really, every home? And like I went back, it's like every home like is pretty much reduced to the foundation. There's like maybe like 1 or 2 kind of still standing, but they can't even sleep in them because they have earthquake damage, right? So it's like everything's gone. And so I told him, I was like, okay, well, you know, I want to come back and help if that's what you need, but I also know like jumping into the middle of like some situation where everything's already crazy sometimes is not all that helpful. So I was like, you know, what would help most if I came back right now, or I came back in like 2 weeks, you know, or something like that. And we decided like, I'm just going to come back in 2 weeks. And so then I was like talking to friends and being like, hey, how can we help these guys? I had already put up a fundraiser on my Facebook page to be like, hey, can everybody say thank you to this guy that saved my life? Because like $1 in America is like 10 in Indonesia. I mean, it's like, you know, like $1,000 here is like $1 million. You know what I mean? It's just like the amount of stuff you can do with our money there is like huge, right? So I had already raised about $1,000 just to be like, hey, thank you. But I'd gotten that to Poor, and so he was actually able to rebuild his home. It's the first home that's actually standing again in Nipah is Poor and his family. So his wife and his kids have a roof over their heads because my friends were like saying, hey, thanks for saving my life, or thanks for saving our buddy's life, you know what I mean? And so that's pretty cool, you know? I feel good about that.
But it's not enough.
No, I really want to help like his whole family, you know? I think I could definitely, if that was all we did, you know, was like just help his like grandmother, grandfather, and all their kids and kids, I would be okay with that. I would really love, because I know we have the power to do it. You know, I've raised millions of dollars for congressional candidates and campaigns and, you know, nonprofits and, you know, doing crazy things in politics. Like, I would hope we can raise $100,000 to rebuild an entire village in Nipah, because it only costs $1,000 to build a home there. Like, you know, I mean, maybe build a home in America, one home for $100,000, but there you can build like an entire village, right? Like 100 homes. So it would be really great if we could rebuild a whole village. But you know, if we could just help Poor and his family, I'd feel really, really good about that. I already feel really good about everybody that's helped out so far, and we already like rebuilt one home, and it's the home of the guy that saved my life. You know, which I think is really a testament to like, it's like a sign to I think everyone. It's like, hey, take steps in faith and be brave, and like life will come and reward you. I don't know like what the message is, but like it's pretty clear. It was like I wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for him, and then I was alive, and this earthquake happened, and then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna help you out in any way I can, because that's what I told him, you know, in a letter. I wrote him a letter before I left, and I said, you know, in my country, when you save someone's life, it's like a debt that can never be repaid, right? Because I wouldn't exist if it wasn't for you. So I was like, let me know. I'm like, here's the money for the fishing that day, because you didn't catch any fish because you were catching me instead. And I was like, and here's a little money for like, as a token of my appreciation, but like, that's not it. You know, like, let me know if there's ever anything I can do. You know, if you ever want to come to America, let me know. If you ever need anything, let me know, you know? And then 7 days later, their whole village gets like destroyed in a 7.0 earthquake. And I'm just like, wow, that guy's gonna get called in a lot quicker than I thought that was gonna happen, you know? So, yeah, I just wanna do everything I can to help them out, you know? Just because it's like an objectively good thing to do. It's like there's no sides here, you know? There's no right or left. There's no good or bad. There's just like human beings just like helping other people build things, you know? And like, and we build things to help each other. You know, that's why we build things. So I'd like to help rebuild a village in Nipah, you know.
Do you think his Muslim faith is the reason that he decided to follow the instructions from that dream?
You know, I don't know. People are very faithful in that part of the world, you know. But it's like here too, you know. Like there's some people who are like really devout and go to church every day, and then there's some people that like, you know, wear a cross or, you know, whatever, right? So like, you know, and then don't go to church ever, you know, like there's a gradient. It's like humanity is kind of the same the world over, you know, like there's people who believe very strongly, and then there's, you know, people that are just spiritual but not very religious. And so I don't really know. I haven't really had that deep of a conversation before because there's like the language barrier. But what I know is when I looked at him and I was like, I wanted to speak in his language, right? I wanted to know like what God, like what's the language of like religion that you use, so I can speak in your language. And so when he told me, I was like, you know, Allah sent you to me. And he shook his head. He was like, yes. So I think that's a pretty strong indication, you know, that somebody is talking to people in that part of the world who are people of faith.
And,
you know?
and that somebody was right about those coordinates, because they ended up needing some real help, and you're providing it.
Yeah, I guess that's a really like interesting way to look at it, which I hadn't really thought of yet. It's like almost like, you know, maybe I got ripped out into the middle of the ocean because there was an earthquake coming a week later, and then there would be somebody there that could help these like really kind and really generous people, because the government isn't there, you know, and the international aid groups aren't there because the government hasn't asked them to come. And so it's like, you know, a fishing village in Indonesia is like a trailer park in America. It's just like, poor people that get overlooked a lot and don't really have a lot of voice, you know? And it's like, well, I have the internet, you know, and I have some friends on the internet, you know, and we've done some cool stuff before, you know, and raised money for some cool causes before, you know, and this is the one that's most personal to me. Like, I feel like there are people out there that if I ran for office someday would help me, and I'm like, this is that. Like, I'm not gonna run. Like, this is my campaign, you know, this is the one that's most personal for me. It's like literally helping rebuild the homes of the people who saved my life. You know, it's like there isn't anything more personal I can imagine doing in my life, except maybe raising money for like my children. But these people are like family to me, so it is kind of that way. It's like their children are my children too, in a way, you know? It was really sad, you know, to see that, because to me it has like this special place in my heart, you know, for my entire life. I will forever remember that village and walking back into it, because it was like my gateway into life, you know, and the people that like saved my life live there. You know, it's just so beautiful. And to see it reduced to rubble is like heartbreaking, you know? But it's really all destroyed. Like, you know, like all of it, it's gone. And so when I got there though, you know, we go up to Poor's place, to his platform, and they built like a smaller house on the foundation where their home used to be. And it's kind of like, it's not really all cinder blocks anymore, because they're all really worried about like being in a home when an earthquake like that happens. Because thankfully some little earthquakes happened, and it was right around dinner time, so everybody got out of their homes and got up on the hill because they thought a tsunami was coming. So that's why nobody died. But they're building kind of like stone homes and then using wood on the upper part, you know, because it's a lot less weight to like fall in and hurt you. And I'm working with a guy that I met actually in Nepal while I was hiking, who's an architect, and he's volunteering to help out, like figuring out where other countries have used have created earthquake proofing or earthquake resistant designs for homes. And he's like researching how we can kind of bring that to Nipah, so hopefully they can build homes this time that are a little bit more resilient, and if they are in their homes, if the earthquake strikes in the middle of the night, then they'll all be safe, you know, because that's really the goal. Is like, you know, there's a lot of people sleeping outside right now, and it's cold sleeping outside. I don't know if you've ever done it. I have. It's very cold. I spent a night in the ocean one time. That was cold. But you know, pretty soon the rainy season is coming, and that's what's really dangerous. Because if people are outside sleeping in the rain, that's going to be unhealthy, you know. And it would be so sad if people survive like a massive earthquake that destroy all their homes, and then somebody gets sick, gets pneumonia or something, and then dies from that because they were sleeping outside. You know, how crazy would that be? So I really feel compelled to do everything possible that we can to like rebuild Nipah, you know, and make sure that the folks who saved my life have homes.